Everybody to the Rutgers Rundown podcast. I'm your host, Nick Hart, alongside a very special guest today. No Matt Mangum. We have the beat writer for the Rutgers men's basketball team, Camden Markel. Camden, thanks for joining us.
What's going on? Happy to be here, Nick. Thank you for having me.
So let's dive right into it. Got a lot to talk about today. We have Rutgers men's basketball, Rutgers women's basketball, a little bit of wrestling, and a little bit of men's lacrosse. But first, let's start with men's basketball. And another tough loss last time out. And it seems like this season has its moments, where it could go a lot better, and then you see a game like you did last time, and that hope kind of falls out.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just, it seems like they can't get things to go right all at once. It's kind of like you finally get these games, like against Michigan on Saturday. You finally get a game where you have a role player step up. You have two role players step up. I think J. Mike had 20, Tyson Acuff, I think, had 14. You finally get this, which has been an issue all season, role players stepping up. And it just so happens that it comes on a day where Harper's injured, so you get no production out of him. Bailey's getting doubled. He makes like 3 shots, and 2 of them are dunks. Nothing seems to go right at the same time. Like when Ace scores 39 in a game, 37 in a game, Harper's out. It seems like nothing can line up correctly, and the role players have been an issue for a lot of the season. Obviously, Dylan and Ace have done their part. At least Harper, that's for when he is healthy. They just can't really string together success, though. They'll come out of the woodworks for a big win, and then they'll fall flat on their face the next time out, it seems.
Well, you talk about it. Listen, Ace Bailey has been nothing short of amazing for Rutgers. He had the 39-point game in the loss against Indiana. Comes out and has 37 the other day. But that's exactly it. It seems like when you don't have those other guys when you do have those other guys step up, it's days where Bailey isn't having his best day or he's not getting the ball. And Harper really hasn't been healthy for the past, probably month of games.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we haven't seen Harper in ages.
Between the flu or mono or whatever it is that they said that he had and now the ankle injury, it's kind of tough because that's what your offense and your whole game was built upon, was going through Harper, having Bailey there. And then if you had another couple guys step up, like a J. Will or a J. Mike to put in 10 points, then that was a recipe for winning games. But now you kind of have to shift that focus, not knowing what the future is with Harper. I mean, he's walking around in a boot, so I would think, as an optimistic fan, I'd say probably day to day, week to week maybe. But you're getting to the point in the season where a week to week injury is like half of your season.
There's not much time left. Season.
So my question is, if Harper isn't going to be back 100%, and you're not going to be able to use that same game plan of, hey, run the offense through him, how do you change it this far into the season?
I mean, there's not much you can do. I mean, like you said, Harper. I mean, Harper is like an NBA level guard, like already. Like I watch him, and he plays at his own pace. He's poised. He's explosive. He makes the right plays, makes the right reads. He's the quarterback of this offense, per se. And you hear it every time he's out, the opposing coaches in the press conferences. Like, when I'm in the press conference for the Purdue game, Matt Painter is just raving about how, this is a different game if Harper's healthy. Like, we're lucky Harper's not in this game. And Izzo kind of echoed the same sentiments. So it's really, really hard without him. I mean, he steers the ship for Rutgers, and like you asked, changing the game plan this late in the season, I mean, it's with Peichel, it feels like the offense has the game plan has not really even been clear to begin with Harper. I mean, we saw early season when everyone was healthy, people were still kind of like what's going on? Peichel needs an offensive coordinator. Like, they have no offense. They don't run sets, which that's an exaggeration. But yes, the offense was struggling. I just really don't know how you adjust. I mean, obviously Ace needs to play really well, but you have, like against Michigan, Dusty May sends a double team at him essentially every time down, and fortunately, Davis and Acuff were hitting shots, but that's really not going to happen very often.
It seems like it's not, and this is kind of something Matt and I talked about last week, is it almost seems, and this is no knock on any of the players that Rutgers has, but it almost seems that this team, they saw the hope of having 2 5-stars, and they're like, yes, please, like, let's bring that in, we want that talent here, but then you kind of forgot about the other pieces. You know, on paper, it was supposed to be a solid team, but then you kind of realize, hey, you know, maybe Martini playing at Princeton isn't going to translate too well to coming over here and playing in the Big Ten, or maybe that Durkak playing at
Merrimack
yeah. Isn't going to translate. It's a different game, you know. It's a lot faster. The players are more athletic, and listen, this is a team where we've seen so many times in the past where it's been keep them under 65 and you win a game.
Mm-hmm.
Because Peichel had never been an offensive-minded coach, but when you're a team that's giving up an average of 74 points a game, it's kind of tough to have that mentality of, well, if we put up 70 points, we can win. Well, yeah, you can, but you also have to have one of your better defensive nights,
right?
As opposed to where in the past seasons, a 70-point night for a Peichel team was a bad night defensively.
That's a bad night, right.
And you probably thought you were going to lose that game.
Yeah, I mean, Peichel teams, it was kind of, we want to drag you through the mud and see which one of us can come out on the other side. And that's obviously not this team, which rightfully so. Things are going to switch when you bring in guys like Bailey and Harper. But Peichel, and I don't know, maybe it was he didn't have the NIL money. Obviously, they lost Cliff because no amount of money, I don't think, could have stacked up with what Alabama had to throw at him. But I also think it was probably time for Cliff to go anyway. He probably wanted to progress his game and didn't see it here. But besides the point, I don't know if it's the NIL, but clearly the talent scouting, again, maybe it's the talent scouting, or maybe these guys just really fell on their face when they got here. Maybe they're in their heads, which I definitely do think they are in their heads. I mean, you watch Martini out there. Finally, he's been hitting some shots lately, but for most of the season, it was like, my God, you can just see this guy, the gears are grinding in his head. He just can't get these shots to fall. But, yeah, I mean, Martini, he's not a Big Ten body. He doesn't have Big Ten athleticism. I think he was a good pickup for what he could have been in a smaller role, but obviously they need him in a bigger role. And Durkak, honestly, I think he's got fine Big Ten intangibles, but again, just doesn't really fit what this squad needs. And then you have PJ Hayes. I mean, again, just don't think he had the Big Ten body, Big Ten athleticism. And also, again, he's in his head. He's out there. We saw him against Michigan. He gets a wide open look, passes it up, ball swings around, he gets it back, and then he jacks up a off balance three. And it's man, if you wanted to shoot it, you've got the green light, kid. Take it.
I almost wonder how much of that is kind of a pressure of playing with Dylan and Ace. You know, these guys have probably never been around talents like Dylan and Ace in their time in basketball. I mean, most players can't say that they have been around talents like
not at all. I mean, who do you have? Tyson Acuff played with Amani Bates. Sure,
But you know, to be saying that night in and night out, you're going out with probably 2 of the top 3 picks in the NBA draft this upcoming season. It's got to be some kind of pressure. But at the same time, I have a thought of, shouldn't that take some of the pressure off you to not have to perform as well, and you might not stand out as much because these guys can go for 25, 30 points.
Yeah, I mean, it's let me watch them, and I'll sit back and just hit a couple shots.
And then, listen, you look at the schedule. They have Rutgers they play Illinois on Wednesday. Then they have Maryland. And then, you know, the season doesn't end easier either. They have to face Oregon, who's a ranked team, and Michigan, who's a ranked team, and then Purdue, who's ranked number 7 right now. I mean, it's a tough stretch, and listen, they're not in the driver's seat by any stretch. They have to continue to win games if they want to make it to the Big Ten tournament, which I've said it in the past. I think, it's a disappointment that it's almost a foregone conclusion that they're not going to the NCAA tournament. I mean, I saw a Barstool article the other day that said we need to make a petition to get Rutgers in the tournament just to watch Dylan and Ace play.
Yeah, I wish.
But it's bad enough they're not going to make the tournament, but to not even make a conference tournament, which is very likely at this point, that's a whole other story.
That'll be a whole nother level. If they can't make the conference tournament, like these people who have Pikel on the hot seat, I'm maybe, looking at them less crazily now if that ends up being the case. But yeah, it's going to be tough sledding. Illinois, they've kind of had a little bit of a rough stretch here, but their big man was out. They're still a really good team, and it feels like in recent years they've just demolished us. And then Maryland's like the hottest team in the Big Ten right now. I forget what it is. I think they've won 6 of 7, maybe.
When you put it in context of what Rutgers has done, that's a lot of Big Ten games.
6 of 7, and oh my, what's Rutgers fans doing at that point? But yeah, they've won 4 in a row. One of them was against then number 17 Wisconsin. Road win against Indiana. Road win against Illinois by 21 points. They beat Nebraska. Lost at Northwestern in overtime by 2 points. So, Rutgers beat Northwestern on the road. Does that mean we can beat Maryland?
On the heels of a 37
Exactly. And then they beat UCLA, Minnesota. So that was the 6 of 7. Yeah, that's a red-hot team. And Illinois is Illinois. Underwood's, he coaches them well. And it's going to be a tough stretch.
And if you're a Rutgers fan right now, you don't have hope going into these games.
No.
You're not to say that you don't have hope, but you don't have confidence going
into
these
which
games.
Could be a good thing because, Pikel teams in the past, it was kind of underdog. When they were, they used to be called the Ranked Reapers. A ranked team would come to the rack, and that's where ranked teams came to die.
So that's something I want to ask because this has kind of been a little bit of a buzz around this season about is Jersey Mike's Arena still the home court advantage that it once was? Because you've said at times that it's kind of been dead in there. It's almost like a nervous energy. What are your thoughts on the whole that Jersey Mike's Arena might not be the home court advantage that Rutgers once had?
Yeah, you said exactly what I've been feeling this year is there's just a weird energy. Maybe at the start of the year when fans were all hyped up for what this season might be, it felt like a regular Jersey Mike's Arena crowd. But even then, those were smaller teams. You're talking, we were playing Monmouth, St. Peter's, whatever. Those crowds obviously aren't comparable to when the crowd is at its best against a Big Ten team. But once Big Ten play started, the season had kind of already been off the rails a little bit. Obviously not completely off the rails, but they had lost to Kennesaw already.
Well, lost to Princeton.
Lost to Princeton. Didn't look great in some other games. So by the time Big Ten play had started and Rutgers was getting these home games, like you said, it's like a nervous energy. It just feels weird when I'm at these games. Something's off.
And I almost feel like a lot of that has to do with the lack of defense on this team.
Yeah, if you can't string together stops, you cannot get a crowd locked in.
Look at some of the plays throughout the season. You look at the Columbia game. Obviously, it's not a Big Ten game, but you have the alley-oop to Ace to start the game, and it's crowds going crazy. It's
rocking.
You had the big reverse slam last time out against Michigan. That would have been enough to send any place going crazy, and you can't make stops on the other end. You have 15 seconds or maybe a full 30-second shot clock of energy, and then the other team drills a 3 or has a wide open look for something, and then all of a sudden the energy's gone.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I've written it in my articles a lot this year covering this team is that they just haven't been able to make the timely plays. They'll claw back from a 10-point deficit, get it all the way to 2, get it to 3, and then they'll get the one stop and it feels like 10 possessions they finally get a stop, and then they come down and they don't have the shot. It just happened against Michigan. They're down 2. They finally get a stop. That was when the rack felt like the rack, and it was I'm sitting next to some Michigan reporters. I'm I can tell they feel this because Chrysler Center, trust me, I grew up going there. That's not all that out there. But you could feel it and then Ace has an open three to take the lead or to tie it. I can't quite remember, and he misses it. And then from there, they let it slip. And when you let things slip like that, you lose the crowd. The crowd slips, and it all comes down to these stops. You can get these highlight buckets that gets the crowd into it, but if 2 seconds after Ace gets a reverse slam, you're giving up a layup at the other end, instantly you've lost the crowd for the next 5 minutes.
And I know exactly the feeling you're talking about because I felt that when Rutgers played Seton Hall earlier in the year.
Mm-hmm.
Tie game, whatever it was, and there was no doubt in my mind that something was going to happen. I was like, I don't think Rutgers loses this game here. And sure enough, Harper comes down the court, he hits the three. It runs in the family because they just have a knack, the Harpers, for hitting big shots late at Jersey Mike's. But I get that feeling. It's like you can feel the pulse of the crowd. You can hear it.
Yes.
You can kind of feel the vibrations. And just from watching it and from going, it's not that same feeling. And it's crazy because this is probably, on paper, some of the best talent that Rutgers has had in a long time. Michael has done a lot more with a lot less, especially in the past couple years.
Absolutely. I mean, when they were on the bubble 2 years ago and they were kind of the snub of the century, I mean, that team, they had Cam Spencer. That was the offensive weapon. You had pieces, but you have 2 5-stars this year.
And somehow, some way, it feels like these Big Ten games where almost every game is kind of it's life or death. These games matter.
Absolutely.
It's the difference of making the tournament or missing the tournament as far as the conference tournament goes. And it feels like Rutgers is playing a mid-major school in the beginning of December.
Yeah, and it's a lot of nerves in that place. Month of the season. I mean, what are you waiting for? It's time now. I mean, it's been time, and so they're really running out of time. And at this point, it's not really it's so unlikely that they go on some crazy run and win 8-9 games in a row.
Well, not even that. They'd have to win out, and I think maybe you have a little bit of a conversation.
You're right. If you win out, you're in an at-large conversation, but I mean, that's not happening.
I still think you have to win the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, I
feel like it's
agree.
the only way that Rutgers finds themselves in the NCAA tournament, and it's almost a disservice to basketball because people want to see the best players on the biggest stage, and unfortunately, and this is not just us saying it from Rutgers' perspective, but you're not going to see probably 2 of the best freshmen in college basketball.
Literally 2 of probably the top 3 picks you're not going to see in March, and the thing is, so many fans are. I mean, I'm not this isn't to sound you guys are casuals, that type of thing, but so many fans are just that. They're casual fans who start tuning in around March Madness.
And you hear names throughout the season.
Exactly, and you're going to be looking for them, and they're just going to be like, wait, where are these guys at?
No, they didn't make it.
Exactly.
And listen, this is not us making a petition to get Rutgers in because they're not a team that deserves to be in the tournament.
They don't deserve it, unfortunately.
They're not a good team. They haven't won big games, and ultimately that's what it comes down to. And maybe they make some kind of magical run in the last month of the season. Personally, I don't see it happening, and I just think there's too good of teams in the Big Ten for them to run the table.
Yeah, it's just the Big Ten's too tough. You're not just going to flip a switch all of a sudden. And the thing is, if they were going to flip a switch all of a sudden, it would have been in these recent games where they pull off a road win at Northwestern, and then you come home and you win another one. That's where you start to build on things. When you beat UCLA at home and then go get a quad 1 road victory at Nebraska for Nebraska's first home loss in however many games.
That's when I thought Rutgers was back.
Exactly, and you just need if there was any time that you were going to start running the table and going on a run where maybe you win you're never going to win 10 in a row in the Big Ten unless you're really good. But maybe you're going to win 7 of 10 or something. But then you come home after that, or you don't even come home. You
basically come home.
Yeah, you go to Penn State to the library that is Bryce Jordan Center, the quietest arena I've ever been in, and you lose?
After you already beat them once.
After you already beat them once and you just beat 2 much better teams, and then again, another chance to kind of redeem yourself at MSG, and I mean, you can't blame them there. MSU is a really good team, but again, these are the opportunities that you look for trying to turn a season around. And instead of stringing together wins, they just kind of get that spotty one win every couple games, and that's just not going to do it.
Yeah, that's not going to do it in the Big Ten, but couple of games left in the season. As I said, 1 month remaining. Never know what Rutgers can do, but Rutgers going up against Illinois at home, Jersey Mike's Arena. That is Wednesday. Hopefully get things going on the right track. Now let's move over to some women's basketball. Now, it hasn't been a great start for them, or really the past couple of years, but 9-13 overall, 1-10 in conference play, picking up their lone conference victory in a very nice comeback win against Penn State. I went out to that game, I covered it, and it was kind of one of those games where you look down at your article or whatever, and then you look back up, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's a 3-point game.
Yeah.
A great win for Rutgers there, and just talking about the dominance in the fourth quarter. I mean, 25-9, they outscored Penn State, and realistically it was 25-6, and if it wasn't for a late foul call against Awa Sidibe on a 3-point attempt, and it was a very complete game. Then kind of riding that momentum, Rutgers came back to Jersey Mike's Arena. They play Illinois, and it was a really, really good game. I mean, Rutgers probably played one of their better games of the year, ultimately falling 69-65 in overtime, but I feel like it draws a lot of similarities from the men's and the women's team. I think they're both very similar, where the talent in the class that they brought in is top. I mean, Kiyomi McMillan, Dylan, Ace, both, they're all players that were top of their recruiting class. And it just seems like other than that, Rutgers doesn't have the supporting cast. I mean, Rutgers women's team, they have obviously Destiny Adams, who's been solid all year. But other than that, the supporting cast has had great games at times, but it hasn't been consistent enough to be a good Big Ten team.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It's really just, it's striking how kind of similar it is to the men's team. Obviously, the women's team didn't have the expectations that the men had, but still, you've got the talent with McMillan and Adams at the kind of the top of your pecking order, and then after that, there's just a stark drop-off where you're hoping these players can get you 8 points a night. I don't know.
I mean, if you get 3 players in double digits, you can almost rely on Adams and McMillan for that. Most games, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, they should give you 20 a night. I mean,
if you can get one other player in double figures, like, you got to figure you can win.
Yeah, you're gonna be right there. And again, it kind of is similar to the men's situation where one thing goes right, the other thing goes wrong. You cover one hole, another one opens up. And you kind of saw it when the women went to Michigan probably like a week or two ago at this point. Kiyomi McMillan had 0 points. And I mean, Michigan's a solid team. Like, it's not like they were going to walk in and get some crazy road win. I mean, obviously they could have, but
I mean, that was a game where JoJo Lacey had a career high in points.
Exactly. So
it goes back to that point.
Is that not exactly what just happened on Saturday against the Michigan men, where Ace Bailey has a horrible night and then Jamichael Davis has a career night? I mean,
or how about even Michigan State at the Garden? I mean, Jordan Dirk
has
his probably signature moment as a Scarlet Knight.
Yeah.
Nobody else showed up.
But the parallels are just there. They just can't string everything together at one time, and it's killing them. And for the men and women, especially the women's side, this is what separates a good team, or even just like a solid team, from a team who's still kind of figuring it out and maybe doesn't really have the pieces, or maybe the coaching isn't as on par as it needs to be. This is what separates them, is you get that game into overtime against Illinois, and what happens? You score 4 points.
Yeah.
Illinois puts up 8. I mean,
you could see it. They were just, between McMillan and Adams, they were gassed.
They didn't have it, and that's what separates good teams from the mid or the bad teams. And, that's kind of how Rutgers' story has been this year. They've had close games. Like, you look at their schedule, and I mean,
it was a gauntlet to start out.
Yeah, and I mean, you only
playing-
lost to Nebraska by 7, who looks like at the time were receiving votes for the AP poll. You only lost to Michigan State by 10. They were ranked at the time. And I know 10's not like some crazy close game, but it's, I mean, that tells me you were probably in striking distance if a couple things go your way. And, you know,
Even
and
against Ohio State and Maryland, like, obviously it wasn't super close, but it was also not great games from some of your better players. And
right.
you look at the games they had to start the season. Start Big Ten play, I'll say. You went up against number 10 Ohio State, number 8 Maryland, and number 4 USC, who are all really good teams. I mean, they're ranked teams, and that was to start the season. So it wasn't the greatest start, no. And you went up against a lot of tough teams. You had to play some of the best, but you're in the Big Ten, and unfortunately, that's what the Big Ten looks like now.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to face USC and Juju Watkins. You're gonna have to play UCLA and Lauren Betts. It's you know, it's the new Big Ten. It is what it is. Every sport has it, and you know, Rutgers might not have gotten a favorable schedule to start, but
Definitely not.
you also have to take advantage of some of the lesser games. You know, you beat Penn State, probably could have beat Illinois, but again, you said it. You don't want to take moral victories, but kind of a moral victory that you played that well against a middle of the pack team, and it gives you hope because Indiana's a similar team, and then Purdue is not that good of a team.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, the rest of the way, as of now, none of the teams are ranked. So, I mean, after you face that gauntlet of 8 straight games of ranked or receiving votes, now's your time to say, all right, like the competition is a little lesser now. It's still the Big Ten. These are still good teams, but maybe now's your time where you can figure some things out and grab a couple wins.
yeah, and again, I think it's going to be maybe 3-4 wins in the Big Ten is going to get you into the tournament because Northwestern is still winless. Purdue has 1 win. Rutgers has 1 win. Penn State has 1 win in the conference. So,
And you have
Penn State has 2. Excuse me.
you have all 3 of those teams on the schedule
Yeah,
coming up.
I mean,
so those are
it's-
games you got to take advantage of.
They're winnable games.
You got Penn State again.
And it's at home. Like, you
Yeah.
played them really tough. Granted, it was a fairly empty Bryce Jordan Center.
The hate train continues. We do not mess with Bryce Jordan
You were
Center.
there, and you said for the men's game even it was pretty
Dead,
light.
man. It was probably like not even half full. I don't know. It was bad. I had a tweet go viral.
I saw.
Almost like 800K views on Twitter because I recorded the whole arena and said, "How is this place this empty?"
I will say, nice arena. I like the setup of it.
It's gorgeous. It's
I
nice.
liked where the press box and everything was.
I
but,
did actually really like that.
right
yeah.
up in the concourse area. It was
Yeah.
nice, but there wasn't a lot of fans there.
Yeah, and,
so,
and I did get a lot of like valid replies with the fact that when they fill up Beaver Stadium, it's because it's like a whole weekend endeavor where people come from like hours away and like they're not gonna come on a Monday night for basketball. But
I mean, but it's
anyways.
a rivalry game nonetheless.
Yeah,
Rutgers. I
yeah.
mean, listen, I'll tell you what, and this is no slander on Penn State. I enjoyed myself when I went out there. It was a beautiful campus.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
I'll tell you one thing: if it were roles reversed, which it was a couple, for the men's team a couple of weeks ago, earlier on in the season, I guarantee you that Jersey Mike's Arena was sold out.
Absolutely. I
I
mean,
guarantee you there was not a seat for that rivalry.
right. I mean, granted, like Bryce Jordan Center is like double the size almost, but
But would you say
I still don't think Bryce Jordan Center, the amount of people that were there would not have filled the rack.
I was gonna say, yeah. Do
Yeah,
you
no.
think that amount of people would
And
fill
their little garbage attendance that's listed on the box score is just a lie. Like I think somebody replied to me on my Twitter like, oh, like this was like their attendance was like 500 people short of what the rack's capacity is, and I'm like, there was not 7,500 people in Bryce Jordan Center. But anyways, that was a tangent. But
listen, it's all in good fun.
yes,
Big Ten
and
rivalries.
women's basketball, they've got some games coming up.
Yeah, they do.
Including
And
Big Ten at the end, or Penn State at the end of the season.
Listen, honestly, that Big Ten game against Penn State could come down to which of those two teams makes it
That's
to the
true.
tournament and which doesn't. Because if things play out the way they do, right as they are, you figure somebody between Rutgers and Purdue is going to have 2 wins by the end of that game. Rutgers and Northwestern, somebody's either going to have 2 wins,
Like
1
2 or
win, whatever
1,
it is.
yeah.
And it very well could be Penn State versus Rutgers on March 2nd at Jersey Mike's Arena. for a chance to get a Big Ten tournament berth. And you know what? I think that if Rutgers continues to play the way that they have, there's a very good chance that they make it.
I agree. With 7 games left on the schedule, and like I said, Purdue, Northwestern, and Penn State are 3 of those. 7 games left, you win. I mean, granted, I feel like they should win those 3 games, but let's say they drop one of those just willy-nilly.
Even if you win 2.
Yeah, win 2 of those 3 kind of lesser opponents and maybe steal one of the other ones. That's again, moral victories, but that's successful for this team, I would say.
It is indeed. We'll move over now to Rutgers wrestling, faced off against number 8 Minnesota. Wasn't a great showing from Rutgers, but you get past that 10 spot, and it just seems like it's a totally different level of wrestling. I mean, Rutgers has they've done well this year, 11-5, 3-3 in conference play. And you look at some of their losses. They wrestled really well against Ohio State. They lost 17-15. You got blown out by Penn State, which is expected. But then you knock off the number 10 Illinois. You upset them 16-15, and then kind of going into this Minnesota, going into the Minnesota meet, it was like, all right, Rutgers has a chance.
Yeah, they just finally got the monkey off their back with the finally getting a top 10 win. You expected a better showing. I mean,
you did, and
to get blown out like they did is disappointing.
Rutgers only ends up winning 3 bouts. Andrew Clark at 149 defeated Drew Roberts, and then it was a lot of Minnesota until, let's see here.
What was it, Peterson and Shaver, right?
Dean Peterson's win over Brandon Morvari, and then Dylan Shaver over Tyler Wells.
Yeah.
I think probably the most anticipated matchup for a lot of Rutgers fans was Gable Stevenson, the
Gable.
number 1 ranked heavyweight, against number 8 Yaroslav Slavakuski. He lost by pinfall. So I want to say that's Stevenson's second. I don't know if it's on the season or of his career, but Gable Stevenson has just been unbelievable.
Dude, he's a different animal. Like, I mean, he there's nothing you can say about him. Like, if you don't know wrestling, you probably, and I'm not even saying I know wrestling like crazy, but you don't have to be locked in on wrestling or anything of the sorts to know who Gable Stevenson is and that he's a monster. So
if you just look at him, he just looks.
Oh my God! I mean, his quads are like the size of my entire body.
It's
I think.
Insane.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a heck of a wrestler, and he's shown why he is the number 1 ranked heavyweight right now. And listen, if you're Rutgers, you got to just continue to roll with the punches. It seems like every sport Rutgers is in the Big Ten, those sports are just like stacked in that division.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Big Ten.
You look at wrestling.
Best conference in the world.
Yeah,
what can I say?
You look at wrestling, it's stacked. Penn State absolutely owns college wrestling. You look at men's and women's basketball, always representatives in the tournament when it comes to that. And then college football this year, and look at the teams that were in it. Look at the team that won it.
Yeah, back-to-back champs, too, Michigan and Ohio State.
Hey, listen, you guys can talk about the SEC all you want when it comes to football, but
it seems like Big Ten's kind of running the show these days, folks.
I mean, Big Ten's making some moves, and speaking of moves, Rutgers football actually made a little bit of a move today. As we all know, Rutgers defensive coordinator Joe Harasymiak left to become the head coach over at UMass, and today it was announced that Rutgers was going to hire a new co-defensive coordinator. So before we say who it was, it's interesting to hear the word co, because I don't know if that indicates that they're going to bring in somebody else,
right,
or if Greg Schiano is going to also take over some of the play calling.
Oh.
But Rutgers hires Zach Sparber, a JMU linebackers coach, to come be the new defensive coordinator here on the Banks.
Yeah, I mean, the co is definitely interesting. I heard kind of murmurs about they got a recruit recently, right? Is it his dad or his uncle? They got a recruit, and there's a tie with a former Ravens coach who just resigned, and everyone's saying, okay, now he's going to come be the defensive coordinator at Rutgers. But then you see this move, and you're like, okay, is that fantasy over? But then you see the co-defensive coordinator. Maybe they're hiring another one?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, my initial reaction was I thought that Coach Giano was going to take over some of the play calling duties or
Right.
or kind of be the head coach, co-defense
Which
coordinator.
would make sense.
Yeah, especially for a guy who is more of a defensive-centric minded coach.
Then again, when he stepped into play call for the Rape Bowl defensively,
different story.
saw how that happened. Although they did say there was a lot of, well, that was more offensively. They said, the headsets stopped working in the second half, but that doesn't excuse the defense. But
so Sparber now becomes the third defensive coordinator for Rutgers since Greg Schiano's second tenure. And Sparber actually is a Norwood, New Jersey native. He attended Bergen Catholic, played football there. He coached there for a little bit. Actually, when he went back to coach over at Bergen Catholic, he coached a very familiar face to Rutgers. Brian Felter was one of his offensive linemen, because he was an offensive lines coach on the 2017 team that won the Group 4 state championship. So, he's got a lot of experience. Coached at Virginia Tech, at Duke, and then at JMU last year. So I think it's a good move for Rutgers. They fill that void, but I will say one thing. Rutgers fans are going to have high expectations, especially after the way the last two seasons ended.
Yep.
Bowl games both years. You have a tougher schedule this year, and you have a new coordinator, and it's definitely not going to be as easy, especially with some new faces, and obviously you're playing a much better schedule.
yeah, I mean, the schedule's going to be a gauntlet. But again, I think the roster will be better. I mean, their transfer portal class has been unreal this offseason. And on the topic of the coach coming from JMU, they had one of the top pass rushing transfers come from JMU as well. So there's obviously the connection there. But yeah, I mean, this seems like a good hire. I mean, Jersey guy, should be a good fit. Hopefully he kind of fits that mold of what Schiano likes with his guys and his staff. But yeah, the co should be interesting. I wonder what's coming with that, but we'll see.
We shall see. They announced the spring game today as well. I believe that was April 26th. We'll have the Scarlet versus White game, so we'll get to see some new faces out on the banks, and we'll see what the next season holds. But before we wrap things up real quick, going to move over to Rutgers men's lacrosse. They kick off their season with a nice 10-6 victory over Lehigh, and that was nice, where Lehigh was ranked number 20, I believe.
20, yeah.
And Rutgers perennially is a pretty solid team when it comes to lacrosse.
Definitely.
And you like to see the start of a new season start off with a win. They play tomorrow against LIU, hoping to pick up their second win of the season. But Camden, I want to thank you so much for coming in today, get your perspective on men's basketball, and any closing remarks before we sign off today?
No, I mean, I'm happy to be here. Appreciate you for having me. Maddie Mangum should be back next week. I think I was coming on regardless. Yeah.
We were having
so we missed him, but happy to come on here and talk Rutgers sports as always. And we're coming up soon on me and Josh Meyer's retirement from the Targum as editors, and that's where you'll see a whole lot more of Nick and Matt. So
you guys
stay tuned.
You guys will definitely be missed. Done a lot for Targum here, but that is all the time we have for today's episode of the Rutgers Rundown. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. For those of you it's your first time, you could listen in at the Daily Targum YouTube channel, as well as thedailytargum.com. For Camden Markel, Nick Hart, saying so long for now.
See ya.